You're listening to Hidden Roll, the podcast where we introduce you to the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. Before we jump into this episode, we'd like to give special thanks to Pop, peopleofplay.com, the one-stop hub for all toy and game inventors. Without them, this podcast would not be possible.
You're listening to Hidden Roll, the podcast that introduces you to the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. I am artist, engineer, and game inventor David Yakos.
And I'm game designer Branson Faustini, and together we get to interview the people who make the world of fun.
And today we've got one of those people who brought a lot of fun and continues to bring fun. Great game inventor from the North, Daryl Andrews. Daryl, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
If you don't know Daryl, the chances are you probably know some of his games. He's bringing us a lot of fun games like Titanic, new games Dark Knight Returns, Sagrada, amongst many, many others. And he continues just to bring the kind of games that everybody just has to play. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Well, Daryl, one of the things that we've kind of seen across the board from one game designer to the next is they seem to be people who never grew out of that creative fun. And I've got to know you, over the years, just from bumping in at some of these shows, and you're one of those guys that always has a smile and always is bringing smiles to everybody else's faces. I can just picture smiley little you. Like what were you like as a kid prior to becoming this game designing genius? Like, did you start out that way?
No, definitely not. I don't even know if I'm a genius yet, but I work with good people. So, but as a kid, I loved games, toys, you name it. It's funny. I'm an only child, and I was always like every Christmas, birthday, I'd ask for board games. Which then I would play by myself and play against myself, or invite friends over, or actually a lot of the times I would challenge people that were over for dinner. My mom's a great cook, would always have people over for dinner, and over dinner I would see that as my window to like recruit people to play a board game after dinner. And so I was always challenging different adults to play games, and they would be really shocked how competitive I was, and how I was going for the win, even from a very young age, of playing, Monopoly to Risk to one of my childhood favorites was Scotland Yard.
Oh, that's a good one.
Nice.
Yeah, that was a game changer for me, because then that was just like opened my mind to there could be so many different games out there. And so especially the old like Milton Bradley's games, stuff like even Hotels was a game I remember back in the day being obsessed with, or Boardwalk, you name it. Just I was all about getting a game, trying to figure out the game all by myself, like it was like studying, so that I could then take out
all your mom's friends.
Whoever was the guest. Yeah, my mom's friends, and they'd come back thinking like, oh, I gotta beat this kid.
So was this in Toronto? Did you grow up in Toronto, or?
Yeah. I was born and raised in Toronto, and I've always lived kind of within an hour or two from Toronto. I currently live in a city called Waterloo, which is a bit of a kind of a tech valley, or a university area. And we were kind of on the map back in the day. If anyone remembers BlackBerry, that's like our claim to fame in this area. And then from that like grew so many more like tech companies and different things like that. Engineering is a big deal. So we have a lot of like mathy, geeky people in town. So I love it. Lots of people that either like board games or they don't know it yet, and they're discovering them. So
awesome. So from beating your mom's friends every night, what is it that you then went after? Did you think I'm going to be in games, or did you start moving to tech, or like what was it that brought you into the grown-up space?
Yeah, I never contemplated like making games as a job. That was in my, not even a thought. I definitely got into like computer stuff. I remember like, by grade 9 and 10, I had taken every computer course there was possible. And I thought, oh, for sure, that would be my future. And then I never did. I just like board games was just on the side. It was a very much a hobby that I enjoyed. And it wasn't until I was in college that I started to even discover kind of this like German strategy games and started to find games like Catan and Puerto Rico and learned about those that I was like, whoa, this is kind of like echoing back to my childhood of like thinking of like how much I loved games and Scotland Yard and things like that. And there, I again was reintroduced and through college played a lot of late nights of Risk or Puerto Rico or Catan, you name it, and that really got me revved up and back into kind of the hobby, I think, but still was not really a factor ever thinking of it as a job. I just really enjoyed it.
What was your first step there?
Yeah, so for me, the big aha moment or first kind of like introduction to learning about that could be even a job was I used to run some tournaments in Canada, across Canada, called the Great Canadian Board Game Blitz, and it was already an established thing where someone else had
dog sleds. You go from dog sled to dog sled from event to event.
Not quite that north, but it's still like there's something nice about when you're up north, you're stuck inside a bunch, and so then you play a bunch of games. We're very much like a coffee sit around culture, and so I discovered these tournaments, and you would actually play 5 strategy games all in a row. It would take like 6 to 8 hours.
Wow.
And they would gather 20, 30 people from different communities, often hosting them at local friendly game stores or, a pub. And they would do these tournaments, and each one, the winner, would get a pass to go to Fan Expo, which is a convention in Toronto. It's like big for comics and anime, but there was a little area for board games too. And we would do the Canadian champion of board games. And so every year we would decide who was Canada's best board gamer. And I never won, but I ended up just meeting a lot of great people and then took over when one of the main organizer moved away. From that, of just like playing a lot of games and running these events, I met some game designers, and one in particular, his name's Sen Fong Lim, a very prolific game designer. Another one, Eric Lang. Both of them really kind of like mentored and influenced and took me under their wings and gave me advice along the way. Especially Sen, he mentored me and brought me into an organization in Canada. It used to be a bigger thing, but it was called the Game Artisans of Canada, and it was like a journeyman process of like you would literally get paired up with someone and go through a mentorship of someone who has like experience making a game, bringing it to market, and they would journey alongside you as you took on that goal of trying to make a viable product, a viable game. It didn't necessarily need to be published, but just that it would go through kind of all the steps of trying to get it to be able to be played by itself in a contained fashion. So that's loosely how I connected and found out that Sen actually lived in my city and said like, hey, well, just come on over. Like, let's just play some games together. You can play test. And so that was the first kind of foray into even thinking about, oh yeah, like people make these things.
There's not too many industries where you get to work with your quote unquote competitors. It's such a friendly group where everybody's like, oh no, we're all done with work. Let's all now go play games till 3 a.m.
Yeah. It just kind of was like hilarious to me that this person, Sen especially, would just be like, come over, play stuff. You can criticize it. It doesn't matter. You can compliment. You can be into it. I'm going to help you even make a competitive product. And it's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's just see what we can make. So it was a very fun atmosphere and very different kind of environment where people are really, I think overall really positive and encouraging people to like, what game would you make? What decisions would you try? And kind of snowball from there.
What was your first game that made it out there into the public eye? Your first published one?
Yeah, well, even when I started like playtesting at Sens, I was very hesitant to make my own game. I was like, okay, like I'm interested in watching other people do this, and so it's funny. Like the real catalyst for me was a person came over. I don't even remember this person's name, but they had driven from far away and they wanted to show this game idea, and they just laid down this huge spreadsheet, like binder of spreadsheets, and was just like, "This is my game." And we were like, "How do you play?" And they were like, "No, no, no, I've just done all the math." And I was like, "Whoa, this is intense." And I remember like they were just like turning page after page, telling us all, and we're like, "But what do you do? Like, what's a turn? What's a?" And there was nothing. Like this person was so deep into this math that they were like they were lost. It was like spending years on this spreadsheet. And I remember when they left, I said, I think I could do a better job than that. And I'm sorry to them, but that inspired me at least to try. And so my very first game, I remember I made out of there was an older dice game called Martian Dice. And it was just like in a little cup. It was published by TMG Games, which sadly don't exist anymore. And I really loved this little dice game, and I made a bigger game using those dice. I was inspired by those dice, and I made this alien invasion game that you'd roll dice, and they would be taking over different neighborhoods, and you'd have to move tanks to clear different areas out. And it was just like this over the top, everything in the kitchen sink thrown in. Never should be published, but it was like my first chance to just like make something and learn from it. And we had little UFOs that you'd like load the aliens in and land them, and then like you'd like shake them out of the UFO and they'd fall into the neighborhoods. It was fun in my mind, and it got me started, but it got just the wheels turning trying to make a game.
It's great trying to explain the premise of a game out loud as a grown-up.
Right.
and how important it is in the moment. But when you say it out loud, sometimes you feel a little bit apologetic to like, well, yeah, we were just trying to abduct people with our little alien spacecrafts. I guess you had to be there. Like,
yeah, exactly. It's weird, but it's like, hey, whatever. Like,
so much fun.
A catalyst. You just go with it. I'm very much like get ideas out of your head as fast as you can,
and being unapologetic about that imagination.
Yeah, just play with it. See what happens. I still to this day remember the UFO. The UFO was actually a plastic cover to your like laundry vent that goes outside.
Oh yeah.
And it fit cubes just perfectly. And so like we would put them on top, and then you'd shake it and they would fall out of the little like grates. And just like, yeah, that's what inspired me. I looked at it and went, oh, this is a UFO. Let's go with that.
Well, that's I guess you can find inspiration everywhere.
Yeah.
I can't think of too many people that go to more game shows, go to more trade shows and cons than Daryl Andrews. Like,
yeah.
Like, how many shows a year are you going to? I feel like every picture I see, you're at another con.
Yeah, I kind of it's funny. I had a big convo with my wife at the time. I had different jobs, and as I started transitioning, I used to say that board games were like a jobby. You know, it was part hobby, part job. As I was doing my other jobs, and I started to transition as I got more and more games kind of out there. I realized like I really want to jump in both feet. And for me, I knew if I could get face to face with someone, I could really get a good read on what they liked and what they didn't like. It didn't necessarily mean I'm going to sell my game, but I can read that feedback. I can understand what better someone's looking for. And so I just thought I got to go to as many as I can, and I convinced my very gracious, patient wife to say like, yeah, go for it, quit your job, and start running around going to conventions. Most people are like, how did you convince that? And it's just strictly my wife's awesome. And she was very gracious. She has a great job that she loves. She's a psychotherapist, and was like, yeah, go for it. We don't have kids. We're okay. Go, try to find some work and see if it's possible. And so I really started as the first show I went to. It was like, if I could sell one game, that'll kind of help justify me going to another show. And so I almost just kind of had a plus or minus running in my head all the time of like, if I can at least get one, then I'll go to another one. And then I would, get one good lead or even a contract. And so that helped me go, okay, well, let's try the next one. And I also then found it as a way to see like, what is good at certain shows, what shows are good for, by just going. And so especially the first couple years, it was like every couple months, and then it increased to like every month, and now maybe even a little more than one a month. But I'm trying to actually cut them down a bit, but it just doesn't work like that.
It's hard when somebody's got a game on the table. It's only one plane ticket away.
Absolutely.
I've as a creative developer, that's I love going to just different trade shows, whatever industry it is, because I feel like that creative fodder, it's like those dryer vents that you look at and like, oh, I can make a game out of that.
Right.
And getting to see what's on trend, what people are more excited about, what types of mechanics are working, and what, especially in a community that's propagating and encouraging each other to continue to make and come up with the next fun thing.
Yeah, it's contagious, and I think in like a really positive momentum kind of way, because you see other people's ideas. I try to like encourage, like, especially early designers, like, don't worry, people aren't, oh, well, hopefully the majority I have not seen are going to steal your ideas, but people will be inspired by them. The fun part is like when you go to things and you see what people are making, that just unleashes like new synapses ideas of like, oh, well, you did this. Now what if, like, jumping off of that, what other ideas could you come up with? And so I'm very happy to show my games and play test my games and play test other people's stuff, especially at conventions, because you just never know what ideas will get, percolated, will get inspired. And the joke is, like, sometimes when I have roommates at conventions, they're like, you were talking a lot in your sleep. I always like sleep talk and even like sleepwalk and move when I'm being creative. And so conventions, I'm always sleep talking and like sitting up and moving around, I guess, on the night. I don't know, but my roommates always tell me that the creative juices are flowing even while I'm sleeping.
So for people who maybe have never been to one of these conventions, kind of what is the overall kind of general experience like?
Absolutely. Well, and so, I mean, there's definitely like a few different types of shows. So in general, there's some shows like I'd reference something like the New York Toy Fair, which is very like business to business. So it's not front facing. It is the type of show that everyone who's there is industry related in some regard. Maybe they're a shopper for Target. Maybe they're a store owner. Maybe they're a publisher. And so like all those different people are meeting together at a show like that. And a lot of the times they're doing different business meetings to figure out, what products are going to be in a Christmas catalog down the road, putting in POs, all that kind of stuff, and kind of finding what will be the new trends. So there's that kind of category of show. I'm going to more and more of those, but early on, I didn't know kind of how to crack into those. So I started more with board game specific conventions, and ones that are kind of front facing in that you can go to them. They have exhibit halls. You can buy games. You can try games. There's demos, tables. There's organized events. There's seminars. All those kind of things are going on, and they scale depending on how big of the event it is. It could be a more local board game con where maybe they're only getting a few hundred, or there's some that are thousands and thousands of people, up to Gen Con, which is like a crazy spectacle where everyone is there, industry people, consumer board game fans, role-playing fans, LARPers, you name it. Like there's all kinds of different sectors all coming out to something like Gen Con, because I think that's like 50,000 people or something.
Wow.
I'm sure I'm wrong on the numbers, but huge and crazy.
It's definitely a bigger C. Like if you're looking for that experience of getting together with a lot of other gamers, a lot of other like-minded people to play games, have fun, listen to talks. That's very high contrast compared to the New York Toy Fair, where it's going to be stores getting their POs for to fill their shelves.
Yeah, and even just the demographics are different. I mean, and depending even what country you're in, like that will change things. I remember, for instance, like when I first went to New York Toy Fair, realizing like I should be in a suit. And it's like, a lot of people.
You have a
like,
suit, Daryl?
well. Well, I did wear a suit. The funny part was like I still wore my hat. I always wear a hat, and so some people may have given me a little side look for that. And also major tip: always wear your running shoes, even if you're in like a suit scenario. I think because you're just walking all over the place, dragging. I like often at conventions, I'll have like a suitcase of different games. And so like you're lugging this thing everywhere. You're racing to escalators, elevators. People are all over the place. New York Toy Fair is actually really bad for like certain publishers don't even meet there. So you have to like go to some other hotel and show them. So you're lugging this into a taxi and all that kind of stuff. And they're busy. You're swimming through people. A major tip is, comfortable shoes. You definitely need some comfortable shoes.
That's the secret. One of the secrets of being a good game inventor.
Absolutely. That's essential. It's funny. My friend Erica Boyora, she works for Spin Master now, and we've co-designed a few games together. The very first show she came with me to was New York Toy Fair. And one of the very first meetings we had was with this guy named Greg Benassar. He's with Asmodee. He's phenomenal to pitch to. And I use this as an opportunity because I was kind of mentoring Erica. I said, certain places will pitch. I'm going to kind of like say less and have you, give it a try. And she was all like professional and prepared and she nailed it. And it was really funny because Greg at the end of it was like, you did amazing. You need to like not put so much pressure on yourself. I can see you're doing that. But even more important, you'll look great. You don't need to have high heels. Like wear comfortable
Where's your
shoes.
tennis shoes?
Right, exactly. He's like, it's making me feel painful. And I can only imagine for you. So like even there, like it's a sign of how great our community is because people are looking out for each other and they're saying, we want everyone to succeed and also like have some fun while you're doing it.
I made the mistake my first couple New York Toy Fairs of setting meetings on the half hour.
Ooh,
and
yes.
I'm like, well, I can make it. Just book it from booth to booth every half hour. Like at least back down to the hour and saving lunch these days. It matters.
I've been guilty of putting them on the half hour because I have a real hard time saying no when someone's willing to take a meeting. It's like, well, okay, let's squeeze that in. And I learned also to really pay attention to floor plans because it's one thing to do like 30 minutes and it's like a couple booths over. It's a whole nother thing if you have to travel. Gen Con, I mentioned before, sometimes that hall back in the day was so busy and so full that even if it looked not that far on the map, just the fact that you had to swim through the tides.
Everybody move!
Push you into different directions and you kind of like, well, I guess I'm going this way. You're like kind of did one of these paths to finally get to your meeting. So you gotta map it out a little bit too.
So it seems like after a year and a half or so of no shows or some digital shows, like things are starting to go back into human form here. How's Reentry treating you?
Yeah, I mean, I will confess, like I found it very difficult. I'm not a digital person. I love cardboard. I love dice and cards. So digital is not my ideal format. And so during COVID, it was tough for me to really pitch or really even feel motivated or inspired. And so I focused more on kind of finishing or supporting the titles that I already had. So now with conventions slowly trying to safely reintroduce themselves, it's been really inspiring and exciting to be able to go back out. And I understand for anyone that isn't comfortable yet, or they're trying to find the show that fits for them. Like people need to do what they're comfortable with and be smart about it. And I can attest that it's been really exciting to see like shows really making a strong effort to make them as safe as possible. Good policies, good protocol, spacing things out. And so, yeah, it's been really fun to like get back into the swing. Starting kind of like even the fall of last year and bridging into this year, a few shows have reintroduced themselves smaller, and they're kind of building back their momentum as they come back. And some of these shows, if they couldn't do that, they wouldn't have survived. They would have had to close down completely. So they're each trying to kind of find the middle road as they build back up to what they might have been. And then some shows, they figured out how to do virtual well. So as much as I say I'm not a digital person, like for instance, one show that I did during COVID was Mojo did the pitch pitch. I forget what the technical name was, but they did like a pitch event, and they did a phenomenal job with the digital. And I thought that was really exciting because I met virtually a bunch of different publishers that I never would have got to get to meet. And
you weren't even wearing any shoes.
No, I know. I was saying it was really funny. I was talking to someone about there's certain perks for sure. I mean, things like you can have a shower between your meetings. You got food with you. You're not missing lunch. You're not wearing. I mean, I wasn't even wearing shoes. So forget the shoe rule. So that there was some real perks to digital.
So when it comes to the digital playing, though, there's some tools out there for digital play and practice. Like what am I thinking? Like tabletop simulator.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on trying to do it that way versus cardboard?
Absolutely. I mean, they're really important tools. Unfortunately, I loathe them. I actually was on a panel at a convention called Dice Tower East, and this was like, I don't know, late summer, like maybe 6 months before COVID. And I remember someone asking me in the audience, what do you think about like tabletop simulator and different tools like that? And I was like, oh, I hate them. I think they're useless. Like I went on and on about all the flaws of them. And everyone on the panel said the same thing, which we instantly had to eat our words only 6 months later to realize like, this is the new normal. And for, forever, they're going to now be part of the process. I think some of the early adopters and people that really thrive on those platforms are going to really like succeed. Like those are really meaningful tools, and communities have developed out of that. I know some designers that never would have been discovered, but that either like bridged the ability for someone who couldn't go to a convention, or like I've talked to people that, couldn't like find playtesters, and then this is a chance because of their isolation to find playtesters. My problem was like, I have lots of playtesters. I love in-person testing. They just couldn't come over. Like, it was just like, let's wait and see. But I'm very much, when I play test, like I was saying before, I try to get out of my head as fast as possible. And then I'm all about reading the room. Like I care about if someone's leaning in versus leaning back. I care about if they're turning to their phone or are they thinking in between turns. Like all those moments that I can't read that while someone's doing a digital play test. And so that side of things was really tough for me. I think publishers could really utilize it for the fine tuning, so that the last testing. But early on, especially for me as a designer, I find it really difficult, to the point that I would not use those, and I would put cameras on my face and hanging, and have other people put a physical table, the game at their spot, and we'd have multiple boards in places trying to like find other ways to do it. And they were stopgaps, but I'm really excited to like get people back to the table in person. And I realize now like why there are old guard and new guard to every industry, and I've become the grumpy old board game designer that's like, no digital.
You're not the bad guy on Scooby-Doo.
yeah, I'm that grumpy old guy. Like,
I would have gotten away with
yelling on my lawn.
One of your superpowers is, I think, your ability to pay attention and pick out those nuances. And I think one of the things I see with a lot of beginner inventors or people who are just putting their toe in the water is they handle that as those moments more as rejection than as a research moment or an inspiration moment. You want to talk a little bit about rejection in your world?
Yeah, I mean, it is something that we deal with constantly. Creatives in general, like putting yourself out there is a constant level of rejection, and then adapting, killing your darlings, and hearing, things that you're like, no, 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 I don't even want, like, we're trying to focus on this. It doesn't matter. It's all feedback and it's all opportunity. And so there's something where you have to like build up that resiliency, and even more importantly, have to build up like the ability to read between the lines and be like thankful. So like naturally, we as humans want to like defend or prove that we're clever or we're smart or our idea was good. And yet every time we have someone react, we get like a real chance to like gain from that and learn from that. And so I was just even having a discussion with someone where, yesterday, where someone said, well, if your feedback, half the people want A and half the people want B, what do you choose? And I said, well, probably C, because that meant A and B wasn't even compelling enough because it was like a split room. And so you haven't found it enough to find the thing that really gets everyone going like, oh, that's awesome. Like, I want to do that. And so those
C wasn't one of the
rejections
choices.
yeah. Yeah. It's just like sometimes you just have to kind of like say, okay, thank you. Now, is that the game you're trying to make? And what is getting in the way of that? It might not even be like the game. It might be the way it's communicating. It might be your UX. It might be, different parts of the teach. But whatever it is, there's now a moment of evaluation to say, something's not working, and how can we make this better? And usually that the table is going to reveal that. I do a lot of co-design, and often you'll run into junctions where it's like, I think we should do this, and my co-designer says, let's do this. And it's like, well, let's let the table decide. We'll put one of them in front of a group, put the other one and see what works. And then it doesn't, it's not about getting your idea across. It's you trying to discover the fun. Like, what was the thing that created the most interesting wow moment, or the puzzliest decision, whatever, like kind of drove people to say like, oh, I want to come back to that, or I want to try that, or I want to share that. And if once you get to those reactions, you're making something compelling.
It's like the right attitude to have going into these things, that resilience and open-mindedness. Those are like essentials in your toolkit for being a designer in a world that's like, how many games are coming out or are even pitched every single year? It's
amazing. And it's funny. Another thing that really taught me a lot about this was actually being on the other side of the table. So for a couple jobs that I've done along the years as well, I've done some consulting. And one time I did consulting for a year for a company called IDW that's like pretty well known for comic books. They do some entertainment stuff, some TV shows and stuff. And they had a board game division. And thankfully, I had signed a few games with them, had a really positive interaction with them, and they brought me on as a consultant with playing the role of the inventor relations person. So I would be at these different conventions, and they said, well, while you're there, maybe split half your time with taking meetings and half pitching meetings, and getting to see other designers, how they did it, and see their reactions and understand, like from a personal level, like what they're going through and how they're putting themselves out there. That really gave me, I think, a well-rounded vision of like this whole process. We're all trying to find and make really fun stuff. Like everyone's hopeful and on the hunt for the next fun thing. So let's make that a positive experience, but also there's just going to be a lot of rejection because there's a lot of ideas out there. An example, at Gen Con alone, I did, for IDW, I ended up doing full-time inventor relations for one show, and I saw 350 unique games. Not 350 different inventors, but some inventors have more or less. But my spreadsheet of like, this is the idea we saw, how many players, yada, yada, at whatever stage it was, there was 350 of them. We took 5 of them back for evaluation, and one of them ended up getting signed. So that was good. Like in our minds, it was like, wow, we even found a game. But to just put the ratios, that was a lot of people putting themselves out there with really great ideas, and only one of those ended up getting made.
Why don't we talk a bit about sort of other trade shows out there and kind of notable ones to you, and maybe a good beginner trade show?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and there are so many. So, we already mentioned, like, for instance, like New York Toy Fair, and that one's a trickier one. That unless you're an engineer or you have like maybe a toy side or things like that, you can kind of maybe get your foot in the door more. But if you're looking to get a hobby game or a strategy game or even a family game that you want to get it in front of a bunch of publishers, I'm actually going to be going to a convention very soon called Origins, and it's in Columbus, Ohio. It's kind of that medium-sized convention. It has that front-facing like consumer side where there will be an exhibit hall and there'll be a bunch of different programs. But there's also a lot of opportunity to pitch games, meet publishers. It's kind of earlier in the season. It's earlier in the summer, so the stress is a little less. People are a little more open to seeing ideas, and as the year gets closer and closer to Christmas, more and more pressure on companies to be busy making the games. I find like if you can get earlier in the year, publishers are a little more open to seeing new ideas, and they're kind of still like dreaming. What can be?
They're not behind
new
yet.
Ideas, right? And so I find that like a very like welcoming, like a little less intimidating type of show. Still lots going on. And you should try to still like pre-schedule meetings, go through the exhibitor list, look on their websites, try to schedule meetings if you can. But you can even like walk around and like build your contacts, get to know people. Maybe you don't get to pitch at that show, but you learn who the person is that you need to talk to. Or maybe you go on Thursday and you get on their schedule on Sunday or things like that, because some of these conventions can run all weekend. And so depending on if you've done design, if you've worked with any companies or not, everyone can kind of walk up and ask, who's the person who makes those kind of decisions? Could I meet them? They might be there or not. And you can kind of start getting your foot in the door with pitching some games. Some publishers are literally one or two people. So you might ask, and it's literally like they do everything. Or you might ask, and it's, someone who's not even at that show, because maybe they have a sales team or something at that show, and they're not necessarily even going to be at Origins. But that's one that I really highly recommend. It's in Columbus, so it's kind of central-ish, accessible, not crazy expensive. We've mentioned Gen Con, which happens a few months later usually in August, and that happens in Indianapolis. So again, another one of those kind of like central locations you can kind of get at it in the US pretty easily. But that one's much bigger. So for instance, that's going to be a very difficult show for you to just like walk up to a booth and necessarily get a meeting at that show. That person's probably actually booked up weeks or months ahead. And so you need to reach out if you're planning on going and you will really want to maximize your opportunity. Like if that's the show that you're like, I'm going to try one out, that's a really good chance to hit up lots of people if you can, schedule things ahead of time. And if you can reach out to, especially the publishers that maybe are a good fit for your game. So depending on, like for me, I make a wide variety. I try to make, if I have kids games, I'm not going to pitch that to some company that makes 2-hour games. I'm going to try to find, publishers that make kids games
and your audience.
Try to get on their schedule.
Part of the hard thing with some of those shows is just the numbers. When you've got that many players, it seems like a lot of the players will have a game that they've invented. It's just the nature of the industry. And then you get some people that have got, hey, I've got 9-10 different games I'm working with. And you got people that are more professional inventors, like, hey, here's my 100 game portfolio. And they go, but some of those, it's just the numbers aren't in your favor as much when you've got, 1,000 people for every inventor relations person. So you've really got to plan ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I always encourage people to try to work on more than one idea, even if you have one, there's something healthy about like putting something on the shelf and working on something else every so often. Because like I almost like describe it like cooking, like putting something on the back burner to simmer. Like that's just gonna make it more depth of flavor better anyways. Same thing. Like if you can work on a few games at a time, there's something kind of nice about like letting something go for a bit and then coming back to it with fresh eyes. And like you said, then that also improves the kind of the numbers game for you too, because now maybe you have a few options. You can kind of go like, oh, here's a game, and then depending on the reaction, go like, oh, well, maybe I have something in my bag that's like that. And so like you can kind of adapt to the room, and you can kind of even synergize like which is the better fit for which publisher you're talking to, and try to like, you know, emphasize certain ones for certain companies because maybe they have a strong suit that's better for it.
Yeah, I'll pitch 10 items in a sitting. You know, if I feel like, well, I need this whole hour to convince you that you want this one game, it's going to be
right.
if they don't get it in the first like 3 minutes, like you might as well move on. Like there's got to be a quick hook.
I'm very much in that camp. So yeah. I mean, it's funny. I have certain publishers that will tell me like, Daryl, please just show me one or two. And I'll go like, but if you know after a couple minutes that that's not it, like we might as well go through a few more. Like let's see what else. You never know. And everyone says like, oh, you know what's your best one. I don't. Honestly, I think sometimes games that I'm like, I don't know if this is good, but it gets a good reaction.
And that's the one they pick up.
And people love it. And then other times I'll be like, this thing's awesome. This is my kind of jam. Crickets, like no one's into it. So I mean, even like I often get asked like, oh, just show me your best one, and I'm like, I don't know how to do that. If I did, I wouldn't make so many, but I make a bunch and they connect with different people. So
here's my best 10. Yeah.
right And usually it just means they're just farther along, because like sometimes too, like certain publishers are looking for a very complete product, and like they're looking for the whole picture, you know, like to the like I've had games rejected where they're like, I love this game, but it doesn't have a catchy title. And I'm like, really? Like you can come up with that. And that like that far finish certain publishers need. And then on the reverse, I've had very rough games where I go like, I don't even want to show you this because it's not fully done. And they're like, no, like it's almost that like I want what I can't have moment. And it's like, sure, I'll show you it, but it needs work. And sometimes some publishers are more excited about that because they can put their fingerprints on it. They can say, you know, I like this, and if you push it this, you know, in this direction, I'd love to see it at the next show, or things like that. So that becomes sometimes better, having a really well finished product and having something that's maybe 80% done, and it still has, you know, that 10 to 20% that can really be maneuvered.
It's such a grab bag from one group to the next. I think you just have to pitch a lot to pitch off and pitch a lot. And because it's going to be different from one day to the next for sure. So what other shows are must go tos for you?
Yeah, must go tos. So one, this is funny because it's not a show I'll probably go back to, but I will give it a plug. Is if anyone's into like role playing games, RPG design, I'm just starting to get in that world. And it's funny. I went to a convention called GaryCon in honor of Gary Gygax, and I had never been, but wow, that was just like a whole nother world. I like was walking around and I was like the fish out of water. It was really fun. And like for me, like I learned a ton and I got to meet a ton of people. It was really intimate, but like chance to like really test things and interact. The networking was a wild. It blew my mind. There were so many, and actually even as more of a board game designer, it was really helpful. I met a ton of like RPG publishers that were like, we wouldn't mind doing a board game someday. And so like those kind of conversations and kind of cross-pollinating moments, I thought was really fun. So I'd give that like a little quick shout out. One that's coming up also, like I think it's this weekend, is UK Games Expo. And that is like just blowing up. It's becoming one of the most important shows, I think, out there. Similarly, PAX Unplugged, which usually happens in December in Philadelphia, that's become like a really meaningful show for board games and RPGs and all that. And then my personal like favorite show, It might be hard for some people to go to, but I think it's incredible, is Spiel. It happens in Essen, Germany. It's kind of the Gen Con International. If like Gen Con was really focused on really like North America, but a lot of games still come over. Essen is kind of like the other half. And so that happens in this random German city of Essen, which there's really not a lot going on in Essen other than, I guess, conventions. And they just rotate a bunch of different conventions throughout the year. But it's really just like inspiring, fascinating. There's like hall after hall where you go in and there's a publisher from Thailand, there's a publisher from Iran, there's a publisher from Germany and France. And like you're just getting this really eclectic, inspiring, like there's games that are strategy, there's educational games, you name it. And I find that like the most inspiring, but also the most productive because there's a lot of opportunities for networking and pitching. And it's funny, I've never actually signed a game there, but I've had a lot of games that ended up getting license agreements. Like, I signed it with a North American publisher, and then we found a way to like get that game also in another region or another language. So far, fingers crossed, I'll be able to like sign one of these years, but it's still just an incredible show of opportunity.
There's something about the getting out of your normal loop that travel will just do in general. And when you get to see, it's like, you growing up on what Monopoly and Life, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, there's German, as you did quote, German board games.
Right.
Like,
right.
This whole new world of strategy where you're going from like 3 rules in a game book to a catalog of rules.
Absolutely. Well, and like you said, travel is so inspiring. I mean, even just because it forces you to see new things and ask new questions. And I mean, part of why, like I mentioned, like COVID was tough was, us all trying to do, what we can and staying home or different things like that. Like I was missing one of my biggest catalysts for like ideas and inspiration and just space, like breaking out of the, your typical routines, give you like new things to think about. And I find like I'm either in the shower or I'm like traveling when I say like the line. My wife is so used to like, oh, I got an idea. And she's like, okay, hit me with it. And I just need to say it out loud. And my wife's really gracious about like listening to it. She's a great listener. I get it out and then I don't want to burn her out. So then I go, okay, now I got to write that down, start working on it. And I probably don't actually even show her that until it's pretty close to finish. But it's my go-to line while we're traveling. It's
otherwise, she's going to psychoanalyze you.
Like, right. Yeah.
So with all the consumer-facing shows, one of the ones that's I feel a little bit more intimate. I know that you've taken part of, like was the Shy Tag back in the day.
Yes.
Maybe touch on your experience with that.
Yeah, it's really funny. I was mentioning earlier, like it took me a little bit to kind of crack in or meet people in mass market, in the toy, like kind of more markets like the toy fairs. And I found personally that to be Shy Tag, now known as Pop, People Play, as like the best way for me to meet people. It was so incredibly like welcoming and intimate. Back for just to describe what I experienced when I went back in the day was, this is a few years back. I went, and for a few days before the convention, there was actually like really interesting like panelists or speakers sharing from industry experts, people that work for Disney, for Lego, all these different people that Mary Cousins had curated and like brought in out of her magical, amazing network of knowing everyone around the world. And she would bring all these incredible people that I would never have access to. And yet, here's like a very significant, influential person for Company X that gave a talk to, a room full of people, and then just like hung out and chatted and like wanted to get to know you and wanted to encourage you. And that is just like so obviously a reflection of like who Mary is and the environment that she inspires. And then everyone like is contagiously continuing that. So there was just like this great, yeah, you got to pitch these people, but even more importantly, you got to meet people and like just like really get to know behind the meeting, you know, who these people are. And that became then much easier to schedule a meeting or reach out at a future toy fair. So to me, that was like the premium, like networking, like doors open kind of opportunity, was getting to go there first, build relationships. There were like really great like networking events, like evenings, like where everyone was encouraged, like, oh, go to this like lobby, like hotel bar and mingle for a couple hours at this. And so you'd get to talk to people. And it wasn't like, you know, a lot of like these other shows I mentioned, people are pretty exhausted when the hall's done. So people are like even like kind of trying to get away, get to their hotel room, sleep. Well, instead, this is like people actually have the energy to interact and like hang out. And so that's something really unique and special that I think Chi-Tag Pop has going for itself, and not many shows can do, because it was more intimate and more personal, and it really had like really important influencers and decision makers all in one place. And so I found that really special. And then they did fun things like the taggies, which was pretty cool to like dress up and see like an award show for board games. It was like, oh wow, like this is the Oscars of board games, and I actually like know all the candidates, or I know all the products at least, and so that was really fun to see go down and be like, oh, that person made that game, oh cool, like as a, you know, getting nominated or winning awards. And my first one I got to go because I was a nominee for like a rising star, so that was just really fun to be nominated. And we even got put into a deck of cards that they put out, and I was pretty excited that I was featured as one of the cards in the deck of cards. So
that's such a fun event, and it's a good concentration of, I think it might be like one of the highest concentrations of inventor relations people to inventors. So it's like you want to sit down and talk to the gatekeeper for
right
all the top brands.
You're just surrounded, and even like gatekeepers, and also like just really accomplished like makers and inventors, where you're just like, what, you made like that product? That's crazy. Like there's millions of those, I've seen those everywhere. And like, so that was like kind of like you said, like the ratios are so great that everyone that you're talking to has like wisdom and experience that you can kind of glean from and learn from, and hopefully long term find an excuse to do something together.
So with all these shows, what's next for you? Like, or what are you excited about that's about to come out? Like any new games we can get a little sneak peek on? What's coming?
Sure. Well, I mean, so just above me, just delivering to stores is Dark Knight Returns, and it had like a very successful Kickstarter published by Cryptozoic. So I'm really excited for that, like get out in the wild. Just the Kickstarter copies have gotten out, and literally a few days ago, I saw it at my local game store and was like, you know, taking selfies with it and getting all excited. And then another one, I'm kind of hiding it, but I've been playtesting this for the last couple of weeks, is Sagrada Legacy, which is coming soon. It's been announced. No one's seen anything. I don't even know if that box cover people have seen. But we've been playing it the last 2 weeks like crazy, and I'm really excited about it. So that's one I'm really excited about. I have a copy coming to me in the mail. It's not out yet, so I can't show off the box yet. But I did a game with Goliath that featured license with, if anyone's ever heard of the Last Podcast to the Left. They do like a really fun podcast talking about like conspiracies and cryptids and you name it, like whatever you can think of. And so I did a board game called The Real Truth, and it's all about conspiracies and running around and finding cryptids and clues to all kinds of different conspiracy theories. So I'm really excited about that coming out and that's going to come out at Gen Con. So I'm pumped about that.
I can't wait to see these. I'm ready for my copies.
I think it's time to ask you some rapid fire questions here.
All right.
Yeah, so Branson here will be your surrogate roller. And
Thank you.
Let's give it a go.
The dollar sign. What do we get here? So if money was no object, what game experience would you make?
Ooh. Well, I mean, if money was no object, I'd probably buy certain licenses and just so that I could work on certain games. Like I've always wanted to do a Transformers game where you could transform your miniatures, so you could be like in like car form or like stuff. Yeah, exactly. So that would be amazing. I also they don't sell great, but or they don't pitch great. I haven't found publishers that are dying for these, but I love sports, so I would love to do some sports themed games. Like I love baseball and basketball. So
so I heard those games were already invented. That's
the actual things are, but I would love to make little like cardboard strategy games based in those worlds. But that's a tough sell. They're not they're not hot sellers right now.
Yeah, tough one. All right, what else do we got here? The lightning bolt. What is that? We've got what game genre needs more games?
Well, I wish it was sports, but I don't know if that's a need. Well, it's funny. I just with Dark Knight, I really had my first chance at designing a solo game. So a game that was intentionally designed with a one-player experience. And I think there's a lot of opportunity coming even out of COVID. Like I think a lot of people think, oh, that, there was a window for that and no more. But I think there's a huge crowd for that. And I think it really like demonstrates itself when you think of all the people that play mobile games or video games, or just like an opportunity to learn a game and get comfortable with a game. I find like solo play is like a really meaningful chance for people to experiment and play on their own. And then maybe it can be something that also is a multiplayer experience. But I think there's a more need for more quality one-player experiences.
It was like you playing Monopoly in your childhood with yourself.
I liked it. So I mean, we need more conducive or easy on ramps for people to do that.
That's a good genre. All right, one more. Ooh. Come on, different. Okay,
there we go.
The sword. Okay, competitive spirit. What is a game that you have no choice but you have to win?
Oh, I like that. I mean, I think Risk would channel that for me. I love Risk, and it's the kind of game that goes so long that once you've invested so much time, you're like, I gotta win this now. Like any game,
total global domination.
That total domination. It's like you're not in there for second place. So that would be my answer.
That's a good one. Well, this has been just wonderful getting to dive into your world. It's fun trying to keep up with you as you trot around and go from show to show. I don't have the stamina that you do from all of them, but we try. Hey, if people are wanting to find or follow you, Daryl, what's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Usually it's my name, sometimes with my middle initial with an M, so it'll look like Daryl Andrews, Daryl M. Andrews. But yeah, please, anyone wants to chat about games, especially if you're a designer or you're just thinking about it or you like games, all those platforms. I love interacting with people, and if I'm traveling, seeing people at shows has been great. And yeah, please reach out.
Well, as always, it's so much fun catching up with you, and thanks for sharing the lowdown on all of the game world.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
This has been Hidden Roll, the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. If you like what we're doing, the best way you can support us is to share us with your favorite brains. Please thumbs up, leave a review, and follow Hidden Roll Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok. You can also sign up for our newsletter at www.hiddenrollpodcast.com for a monthly sneak peek at our upcoming content. That's hiddenroll, R-O-L-E, podcast.com. Our episodes are available on all major listening platforms, or if you'd like to see our beautiful faces, all of our content is available to watch on YouTube. If you know of someone who would be a great fit to appear in our podcast, or if you'd like to learn the story behind any toy or game, send us an inquiry at hiddenrollpodcast.com/suggestions. Or let us know on our social media. We love to hear your feedback and ideas. Once again, special thanks to Pop, People of Play, the one-stop hub for all toy and game inventors. Visit www.peopleofplay.com to learn more. This podcast is also made possible by the continued support of the brains who never grew up, inventors of play, Streamline Design. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.